The mask you wear that's slowly killing you. The most dangerous mask you wear is not the one that doesn't fit, it's the one that fits perfectly. Think about that for a moment. We tend to assume that the roles making us miserable are the ones we struggle with, the job we hate, the relationship that doesn't work. But what if the real threat is the role you're so good at playing that you've forgotten it's a role at all? What if the life everyone admires you for, the one that earns you praise and promotions and love, is the very thing quietly hollowing you out from the inside? That's what we're exploring today. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Over a century ago, the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung gave a name to something every human being does, but almost no one examines. He called it the persona, borrowing from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in ancient Greek theater. The persona is the face you present to the world, your social self, the version of you that knows what to say, how to behave, what to reveal, and what to hide. And here's what matters about this for you personally. You are not just wearing one mask, you are wearing several. One for your family, one for your work, one for your closest friends. One, perhaps the most carefully constructed of all, for yourself. And if you have ever felt a strange exhaustion you can't quite explain, a quiet sense of emptiness after a day where nothing technically went wrong, or a creeping suspicion that the life you've built doesn't actually belong to you, then this video is not abstract theory. It is about the inner architecture of your daily experience. What we are going to do here is walk through what the persona actually is, how it forms, why it becomes dangerous, what it costs you psychologically, and most importantly, how to work with it instead of being consumed by it. This is not about ripping off your mask. Jung never asked anyone to do that. It's about something far more subtle and far more important. Let's start at the beginning. Not with your beginning, but with the concept itself. The persona, as Jung described it, is not a lie. That's the first and most critical thing to understand. It is an adaptation, a necessary one. Every time you walk into a room, you make dozens of unconscious calculations about how to present yourself, what tone of voice to use, how much emotion to show, which parts of your inner world are appropriate to share and which are not. This is not deception. This is social survival. Without a functioning persona, you would be unable to hold a job, maintain relationships, or navigate even the most basic social interaction. Jung was very clear on this point. People without an adequate persona are not more authentic. They are often socially disintegrated. The persona is the interface between the vastness of your inner world and the demands of the outer one. It is, in a real sense, a kind of diplomacy. But here's where things get complicated and where your story enters. You did not design most of your masks. They were designed for you. In childhood and adolescence, through thousands of micro-interactions, you learned which parts of yourself were welcomed and which were not. You told a joke and the room laughed, so you became the funny one. You cried and were told to toughen up, so you learned to hide your pain. You got good grades and suddenly you were visible, valued, so you became the achiever. You kept the peace between your parents and they called you mature, so you became the responsible one. None of these were conscious choices. They were survival strategies. The mask was not handed to you with instructions. It grew onto your face so slowly, you never felt it arrive. And that is exactly what makes it so hard to remove later. You don't experience the persona as something you're wearing. You experience it as something you are. And this is where the danger begins. Because now the question becomes, what happens when the mask works? Here's the thing almost no one warns you about. The persona becomes most dangerous not when it fails, but when it succeeds brilliantly. Think about what happens when the world rewards your mask. You present a certain version of yourself, a competent, agreeable, put-together version, and you receive approval. Promotions, love, respect. The external feedback is overwhelmingly positive, so why would you ever question it? Why would you look beneath a surface that everyone around you seems to admire? This is what Jung called identification with the persona, and it is, in his framework, one of the most common and quietly devastating psychological conditions of modern life. You stop being someone who wears the mask. You become someone who is the mask. The boundary between your role and your soul dissolves so completely that you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Consider the modern version of this. You curate an identity online. Warm lighting, thoughtful captions, the right books on your shelf, the right opinions in your feed. And at first, it's playful, a highlight reel, nothing serious. But over months and years, something shifts. You start making decisions not based on what you want, but based on what fits the narrative you've built. You go to the restaurant for the photo. You read the book so you can reference it. You have become a curator of a person who doesn't quite exist. And the real self, the one with doubts and confusion and desires that don't photograph well, gets pushed further underground with every post. Now, here's something crucial to understand. Everything the persona rejects doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere. Jung called that somewhere the shadow. The shadow is the warehouse of everything your mask says you are not. If your persona says you are kind, the shadow holds your cruelty. If your persona says you are strong, the shadow holds your vulnerability. If your persona says you are selfless, the shadow holds your rage, your hunger, your need. The two exist in a direct inverse relationship. The more rigid and polished the mask, the darker and more volatile the shadow becomes beneath it. And this is why some of the most put-together people you know are also the most internally fragmented. The effort required to maintain the persona and suppress the shadow is enormous. And the psyche eventually always protests. So what does that protest look like? It rarely announces itself with drama. It whispers first. It shows up as a chronic, low-grade anxiety with no obvious source, a feeling of going through the motions, performing your life rather than living it. An emotional numbness that puzzles you because, on paper, everything is fine. Burnout that doesn't resolve with a vacation, a strange sense, difficult to articulate, that you are watching yourself from a distance, present but not inhabited. These are not simply symptoms of stress or overwork, though they often get labeled that way. In a Jungian framework, these are the psyche's distress signals. They are the sound of the real self suffocating under the weight of the performed self. And they will intensify until something breaks. And something does break. It always does. Eventually. It might be a job loss, a divorce, a diagnosis, the death of a parent, a moment of public failure or humiliation. These events are devastating not merely because of what they take from you practically, but because of what they take from you psychologically. When the persona cracks, you do not experience it as losing a role. You experience it as losing yourself. Because if you have spent 20 or 30 years fusing with the mask, then when the mask is torn away, there is a terrifying moment where you look inward and find, or fear you find, nothing. This is why midlife crises carry such existential weight. It is not simply that life got hard. It is that the person you spent decades constructing was never fully real. And somewhere deep inside, a part of you finally knows it. But here is what Jung understood, and what I want you to hear clearly. That moment of cracking is not the end. It is the beginning. He would have called it the start of individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath the accumulated roles and expectations. The crack in the persona is not a breakdown to be fixed. It is a breakthrough to be honored. Some of the most meaningful psychological growth a human being can experience begins in exactly the moment when the mask fails and the person is forced, sometimes for the first time, to confront the question they have been avoiding for years. If I'm not the role I've been playing, then who am I? So the question becomes, do you have to wait for a crisis, or can you begin this work now, consciously, before the persona shatters on its own terms? The answer, and this is the part Jung considered most important, is not to destroy the persona. You need it. You will always need it. The answer is to hold it lightly, to know when you are putting it on, to feel the moment you shift into a role, the way your voice changes on a work call, the way you rearrange your face before answering the door, the way you edit yourself before speaking in a group. Not to stop doing those things, but to notice, to remain the one who chooses the mask rather than the one who has forgotten they are wearing it. This is what Jung meant by a flexible persona in service of the self. The self, in his psychology, is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, mask and face. A healthy persona serves the self the way a good ambassador serves a country. It represents you in the world without replacing you. It translates without distorting. And the practice is deceptively simple. It begins with one honest question, asked not once but regularly, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. The question is not, who does the world need me to be? The question is, who is still in here, underneath all of that? Here's what I want to leave you with, not as an idea, but as something you sit with tonight when it is quiet and you are alone. If everyone who knows you, your partner, your parents, your boss, your friends, if every single one of them forgot you existed tomorrow, who would you be? Not your name, not your job, not the role you play for them. Who is the person underneath all of that? And when was the last time you let that person breathe? If that question unsettles you, good. That is the self knocking. If this changed something in how you see yourself, even slightly, you might consider subscribing. This channel is a quiet place and we go deep. There is more ahead, and I think you will find it worth staying for. ****